recording then.
I drove through on the Sunday.
Are they going to Do we know who will be talking?
Yeah.
Your guitar?
Yeah. Five of us, in fact, will all be introduced at the beginning, which should be in about 5 minutes. To go. Yeah, 5 of us sitting behind the table.
Lena's children asleep in their bedroom on the deck. Downstairs, the incident last summer on the steps of Salisbury Cathedral.
Squeak. This will not do.
Okay then, thanks for coming. Good to see so many people here. We've got quite a lot to tell you today. A lot of things have happened, a lot of things have changed. Not just as far as Stonehenge is concerned, but everywhere really, right around the world. And that's going to be one of the main themes of today. The fact that the international situation is such that it's time for the whole Stonehenge issue, and it has many sides, to be broadcast far and wide, because we haven't got very far with our efforts to publicise what's going on in this country, although we've made some ground. The issues around Stonehenge can basically be broken down into 3 main areas: spiritual, cultural and political. The spiritual side of it is that there are a large number of people in this country, very green-minded people, who have been for much longer than a lot of the people on the new green bandwagon, who see Stonehenge as a very important link with the past, as a temple, as an astronomical calculator, and that's why we go down there for the equinoxes and the solstices, because what they are is the turning of the seasons. And that's really important to be aware of which season it is. It governs life, it governs growth, it governs the way we feel, it governs the amount of light and energy that falls on the planet from the sun. Those are all things that have very important effects on everyone and on all life. The cultural one is that because of the gatherings that started happening at Stonehenge in the mid-70s and which continued until 1985, there came about a group of people which sometimes calls itself family. Not everybody shares the same views within that family. There's a lot of arguments, but there's a basic link between everyone that comes from having done a lot of really important things at Stonehenge over a very long period of years. A large focus of that is the travelling community. It used to be called the Peace Convoy. We've fortunately left that term behind. And what's been happening with the authorities preventing people from gathering at their traditional once-a-year meeting place is a grave abuse of human rights. The reason that Stonehenge became so important to particularly travellers is if you travel, you're on the road all year, you're in small groups, you get dispersed, you move around. The only place you can actually find all your friends and relations and all the people that you know is if you all arrange to be somewhere once a year at a particular time, and that was what Stonehenge was about culturally. The reason it came about was partly because of the spiritual thing. Politically, the measures that have been employed over the years to keep people away from Stonehenge have become so draconian that it's hard to believe they're happening. Now, with me on this table we have a number of people who represent very, very different views, who all come under this umbrella of, if you like, the Stonehenge campaign. We prefer parasol because of the connotations with sun. So Stonehenge campaign is a parasol organisation. I'll just introduce now the people who we've got. Lynn is a traveller who lives on a bus with her family, has lots of kids, and has been part of the scene for a very long time and knows all the problems of being on the road and all the advantages. Don, on my left, is from an organisation called Travellers Aid Trust, a registered charity set up in the wake of what happened at the Battle of the Beanfield in 1985 and what happened at Stony Cross in 1986, when several hundred families had their homes taken away from them and never given back. Rick Hope is going to speak on behalf of the campaign and put forward the plan of action that we have for this year. And Rollo Moffling is a member of the Glastonbury Order of Druids. He's also got another title which I can never remember because it sounds so grand. And he'll explain that to you when he speaks. It's worth pointing out very quickly a number of things. First of all, we had to pay for all that food, and any donations that you can give me out are welcome. It's a condition of hiring the room. Secondly, just to say a little bit about myself, I edit a magazine called Festival Eye. Spent some time on the road, and I'm very angry about what's been happening. I've put a lot of time and energy into trying to do something about it, which is what campaigning is all about, really. Copies of last year's Festival Eye are up there. Actually went out through Smith's last year. We'll be doing so again this year, with a bit of luck. Okay. If I can turn over now to Lynn. Say hello, please.
Right. Well, I'm a traveller. There are projects when there are lots of different types of travellers. I'm to do with the showman's aspect of it, and that we put on festivals, we put on the entertainments, and all that sort of thing. There are a lot of other travellers who do other things and don't necessarily go to festivals. There's a lot of people who go to festivals who live in towns and cities, and all through the summer season there used to be anyway, smaller events, and Stonehenge was like the big one where everybody got together. And being at the summer solstice, you know, it's such a good time to meet your friends and relations, your family and everything else. And we've had this missing for 5 years now. And there are some people I haven't seen for 5 years, you know, because you've missed them, you know, on the road somewhere. And I feel quite strongly that we need an annual gathering, a big one. I'd like to have it at Stonehenge. In the meantime, I think that Stonehenge is also very important to the people who have religious inclinations. And I think it is quite important to keep up this campaign. I think it is totally wrong for the authority to be crushing both the access to the stones and the festival. But I think it is quite important to make a difference between the opening of the stones and the festival. You know, they are two distinct things, certainly from my point of view. What else can I say?
What's it like being on the road?
What's it like being on the road? It's getting worse. The legislation that is hitting us these days is quite phenomenal.
Yes. The Public Order Act is the main one. And shall I just explain a little bit how it directly affects us, the Public Order Act? On site, policeman comes along and says, right, you're off. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. If the policeman is wrong, you have to go to court afterwards and show that the policeman is wrong, by which time he's somewhere else. The only option you've got other than moving is being arrested, which means that basically you're guilty before you go to court. You've actually got to go to court to prove that you're right. Now that is about the only time, apart from the terrorism acts, where British law says you're guilty before you've done anything, before you actually get to court. This is taking a lot from the festival road, it's stopping festivals, and it's causing an awful lot of grief. The new bit of legislation that's about to hit us is the acid house one, which is, we've got absolutely nothing to do with acid house parties or anything else. But the legislation that's going to crush those will also seriously affect festivals and any big gatherings of any sort. So life on the road is getting tougher. The councils all over the country aren't providing sites as they should do for ordinary winter living. Homes in general are just becoming more and more repressive, and there's not really very much the travellers can do about it. Now, actually getting this information across the general public is very, very hard.
Okay. Right. Well, to take questions after.
Yeah.
Okay, John Atkin.
Well, as Alex said, I'm a trustee of the Travellers' Aid Trust, which is an organisation which provides a general welfare service for travellers with the emphasis on new travellers. And ever since we were set up in 1986-87, we find that the greatest part of our attention is having to be devoted to the field of legal advice, and not just legal advice generally, but what I might call crisis legal advice. And I'd just like to fill you in on a few things that have been happening in that area. The biggest and the most important is that at long last, after 5.5 years, the trial of the civil cases against Wiltshire Police arising from what happened in the Beanfield in 1985 is coming to court. I actually have a hearing date for that, and this hasn't, as far as I know, been announced before, but the trial will be in the High Court at Winchester, starting on September the 17th this year. The trial is expected to last between 3 and 6 months. There are 40 plaintiffs with claims including assault, unlawful arrest, false imprisonment and damage to property. It has been estimated that if we all win, I should perhaps say that both I and Lynn are among the plaintiffs in that case. If we win, the damages awarded are likely to be of the order of £250,000, which would be the largest single award ever made against a British police force. Obviously, that case being pending, I can't comment on the merits, but I think a lot will come out in that trial, which will shock a lot of people and hopefully inform a lot of people about the way that the police were carrying out their functions in that year. The other thing I'd like to mention is something that Lynn has already brought up, the so-called Acid House Party Bill. That's not actually what it's called. The most interesting thing in many ways about this piece of legislation is its title. It's called the Entertainment Increased Penalties Bill. I think that perhaps reflects a certain way of thought that's behind it. What this is about is increasing the penalties for putting on a public entertainment without a licence. The maximum fine is multiplied by 10 to £20,000. There's a provision for the first time for imprisonment. There's also a new provision for the confiscation of profits which is only likely to be used against large events. Much more important in relation to small events, there's a provision for the summary confiscation of all equipment used at unlicensed events. And as Lynn says, it's inevitable that this is going to be used against a very wide range of events, whether they've got anything to do with the Acid House Party scare or not. Second reading on that bill is on March the 9th in the House of Commons, and we do hope that there will be some opposition. The other couple of legal things relating to what happened last year are worth a mention. It's notable that as each different tack they try fails, they bring in something new. And last year there were two new unexpected bits of law that they used, both of which involved the local authorities. The first was the action taken by Wiltshire County Council by way of road closure orders to stop people parking on the trucks in the neighbourhood of Stonehenge, not just at the summer solstice, but at the equinoxes and the winter solstice as well. It seems to be perfectly obvious that the purpose of this is to create trouble. The purpose is to make it impossible for people to park on the tracks. Therefore, if they're in the area at all, they have no alternative but to go onto private land, which is something that up to now they've been able to avoid. And thereby trouble and confrontation will be created, and it seems really inevitable that we come to the conclusion that that's what the County Council would prefer. The other intervention was from Salisbury District Council, which made orders under the Public Order Act banning processions within 4 miles of Stonehenge. The interpretation put on that by the police and upheld by Salisbury Magistrates Court, though unfortunately we haven't had a test case in a higher court, is that makes it illegal for more than one person to walk anywhere in the affected area. This, of course, was not applied to the thousands of residents of Amesbury who went shopping during that period, or any of the large number of other people who did other things. It was applied in a discriminatory way against people whom the police wanted to get rid of. It was under those provisions that there were 260 arrests last year, and it's interesting to note that only about half of those were even charged. It's worth reflecting over the years since '85, when this was all going on. There have now been over 1,000 arrests. There are no signs of this going away. But one thing that has changed for the better during that period is I think we've all learned something. And last year we had 260 arrests in circumstances that seemed quite confrontational at one point. But those arrests took place without any violence and without any injuries on either side. And I think people who are interested in Stonehenge have now established a commitment and an ability to avoid violence and to ensure that if the authorities insist on arresting people, those arrests will take place in that way. And I think that's something they deserve some credit for. I understand that this has been and is being actively pursued, and that some of the more dedicated Stonehenge activists are organising more extensive training in the whole area of non-violent direct action in the run-up to this year's events. That's about it as far as I'm concerned, except really to endorse what Lynn said, that things are getting harder. The authorities keep bringing new weapons out of the arsenal. If all else fails, they'll change the law. They're now doing that just as they did in '86 with the Public Order Act. It all really follows up a comment Mrs. Thatcher made in 1985. When referring to what I think were being referred to at the time as the hippies, she said that their life ought to be made as difficult as possible, and that's what's being done. Whether this is a legitimate function for the government to assume in relation to a section of the citizens of this country is a question which we'd like to see discussed.
Right, turn now to Rick Hope, who's going to speak on behalf of the campaign and give you an idea of what's planned.
Thank you. The ban on celebrating the summer solstice at Stonehenge is now 6 years old. The Stonehenge campaign, which I speak for today, is also 6 years old. The dispute in question is concerned with the right to follow a tradition celebrating the solstice that goes back at least 2,000 years before Christ. This year, 1990, sees a campaign to bring back the celebrations, better organised and more sure of our eventual success than ever before. If the British authorities, who are against the celebrations, believe we will give up, they forget a lesson of history all rulers should remember. Suppression breeds sedition, as we have found in Eastern Europe recently. The government ban on the solstice celebrations has brought out the Dunkirk spirit in thousands of people throughout Britain over the last few years. Winston Churchill, who was a Druid, would be proud of the so-called hippies, who for the last 5 years have braved police blockades and terror tactics, all for a just cause. They have used great ingenuity and bravery to survive and defy peacefully the full force of the state, put against them at times with diabolical violence. Since the ban was announced, we estimate some 30,000 people have celebrated the solstice in or around Stonehenge, despite the ban and its attendant police helicopters. That is a major achievement. In the same period, we calculate the authorities have spent about £6 million trying to prevent people from celebrating the solstice at Stonehenge. We do not regard this as an achievement the authorities can be proud of. It is a tragic waste of resources and everybody's time. It is also a national scandal that so many people should be denied their legal rights at such a vast cost. We have thought they'd have found a cheaper way of doing it by now. Stonehenge has been described as a national icon. It was given to the nation by Mr. Chubb in 1918 with a stipulation written in the deed of gift, a legally binding document, that the people of Britain should have access to the stones at all times. This ban rides a coach and horses, not to mention the police helicopter, through Mr. Chubb's legal stipulation. However, Stonehenge is not just a national icon, it is a world icon, a site of international importance and significance to millions of people throughout the world. How would the British press react, for example, if the Egyptian government was to surround the Great Pyramids with barbed wire and riot police to deny access to thousands of people? Of course, unlike our government, the Egyptian government would never be so stupid. Judging by the international reaction so far, if the government does not end the ban on the solstice celebration soon, it stands to be the laughing stock of the world. Regarding our international campaign, plans are already well advanced for protests and solstice celebrations to be held outside British embassies and consulates in several major world centres on the summer solstice this year. The campaign is also attempting to finally get the case to the European Court. We sincerely hope that the violent arrests of peaceful protesters will be a thing of the past and aim to ensure that the world will be watching this time. The Stonehenge campaign believes that all sides have learned something in this dispute. We are sure that serious negotiations to end this farce could be successful. We are ready to work towards ensuring peaceful celebrations this year and to organise greater things for the future. With the future in mind, one of our slogans is Bring Back Merry England. The original Merry England period ended with Oliver Cromwell and his Puritan roundheads. They subjected the country to a Christian fundamentalist purge, paying particular attention to the suppression of the dreaded pagans, i.e. non-Christians, thousands of witches were burned at the stake. Today, the authorities may not be burning witches, but we have had enough of the Cromwellian attitudes of this government. We say, bring back Merry England, and stop sending the riot police against people who are only dancing in the field. Finally, the building of Stonehenge was finished around the year 2000 BC, the Stonehenge campaign intends to cheerfully ensure it won't be 2000 AD before the British government ban on its use is ended. Thank you very much. Now I have a list of events. There's leaflets here. And these events are for your information. I'll read it out and you can take copies. There's plenty of them around. So this is events for 1990. 15th of March was a public meeting at Salisbury City Hall. 20th of March was spring equinox, and that's at 21:18 hours. 1st of June are launch parties for London walks to Stonehenge. The 1st of June is also the anniversary of the Battle of the Deanfield in 1985. The 2nd of June, walks to Stonehenge start from London, Wales and other major cities in Britain. On the 16th of June, the London to Stonehenge charity bike ride starts. From the 15th to the 25th of June, the Stonehenge Free Festival. Bands from Norway, Berlin and Holland have already asked to be invited. The 21st of June is National Youth Day. The 21st of June will also see pickets and solstice celebrations of British embassies with Hope Worldwide. On the 17th of September 1990, the trial of supportive civil action was brought against the Chief Constable of Wiltshire of the Battle of Deanfield, Pogrom in 1985. The trial, which will be held in Winchester, will take between 3 and 6 months. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, and finally, Ryan Moffling, one of the Glastonbury Order of Druids.
From my understanding. Well, Alex mentioned at the beginning another title. Yes, indeed, I am Archdruid of the Glastonbury Order of Druids, but I'm also subscribed to the Grand Council of British Druid Orders, which represents 4 constituent orders of Druids: the Glastonbury Order of Druids, the Secular Order of Druids, the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and the Ancient Order of Druids. Now this numbers some 3,000 or 4,000 people. Now, I already made a statement previously in which I likened the closing of Stonehenge to Midsummer to the closing of Westminster Abbey at Christmas. And Grand Council of British Druid Orders was formed not only to unite all the Druids in a common policy for creating an atmosphere whereby Druidic solstice celebrations at Stonehenge and other sites might safely and amicably take place in the future, but as all those people who come to Stonehenge at summer solstice, as indeed at other times of the year, winter solstice and the equinoxes, we are of the opinion mainly come in peace to celebrate with us. Everybody who is at Stonehenge at those times would be a congregation of people there, and the Druids, as priests of the ancient Celtic faith, have long time since, as Colin went through, Professor of Archaeology at Cambridge, has described Stonehenge now as the proto-Druidic temple. It used to be fashionable one time to say Stonehenge has nothing to do with Druids, it's now acknowledged it does. We have called upon some of our ancient laws for being able to reopen Stonehenge in the future peacefully and legally. In fact, on June the 21st, 1989, this summer last year, the Grand Council of British Druid Orders made a public proclamation on Primrose Hill of a petition which was presented to Her Majesty the Queen 1 year in advance, as has been the custom since 1176, to hold a national Eisteddfod at Stonehenge on June the 21st, 1990, to coincide with a religious gathering of Druids to celebrate the solstice, with prizes awarded for excellence in the following arts: poetry, music, film, art, dance, theatre, healing philosophy, ecology and natural science, and geomantic archaeology. Now, this is in accordance with legal precedents granted to Druid orders by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I in 1568 and 1594, and ratified by both Houses of Parliament in the reign of Queen Victoria in 1898. It is respectfully submitted by the Grand Council that it lies within our power, to hold a peaceful and ordered Eisteddfod event at Stonehenge this midsummer, which will not only encourage the arts, but will become in due course a credit to the nation both at home and abroad. We, the Grand Council of British Druid Orders, view the establishment of an English Eisteddfod at Stonehenge as a means laid down within the law, not only for securing a peaceful and orderly event at Stonehenge in 1990, but also as a way of reducing the current impasse, and it's a time-honoured method employed throughout history, managing events at such times of peak demand as currently present. It's also the correct way of upholding the religious rights of Druids, who established at Stonehenge in 1724 and continued annually since 1875. Now, the important point here is that custom and usage of the laws relating to Eisteddfod date back from the time of 1176, Lord Rees, and the first written records we have of Eisteddfod held at Cardigan, and under English law, being 13 years prior to 1189, which is the year of the accession to the throne of Richard I, are therefore deemed to have been exercised since time immemorial. This means that it is a lawful celebration, and thereby, by the same token, having been proclaimed, as is the Welsh Eisteddfod, 1 year and 88, English Heritage, fearing damage to the stones, issued only 500 tickets. Now, 1988 was a year when the major CND festival at Glastonbury was not held, and as a result, there were 4,000 or 5,000 people trying to get into Stonehenge Arena, and it seems obvious, certainly what happened at the time. English Heritage panicked, called in the police, closed it, so there were apart from 500 people inside celebrating, there were 4,500 people outside being herded into a narrow roadway with barbed wire fences on either side, being pushed back by police in riot gear. And in any situation like that, where crowd build-up occurs, there is liable to be accident, there is liable to be panic, and there is liable to be violence. Now, we believe it is possible to manage an event in such a way that none of those things occur. And it is possible to take people into the Stonehenge Arena, and peaceably disperse them around the site in such a way that an orderly event can and will occur. In fact, last year, when the stones were closed, we asked people as an act of good faith to stay away for a year until such times as we could legally reopen Stonehenge, that is in 1990, this year. That last year, as you heard earlier from Don, some few hundred people turned up anyway, and policing bill for 800 police to deter them was £520,000. Now, someone calculated that this would have been easier to have paid each of those who attended last year £500 to go away, and spending that amount of money on police time and manpower. So, this year, the Grand Council of British Druid Orders seeks to aid Lord Montague and his many other people's wish to see an organised event, i.e. the Eisteddfod, and we put it to Wiltshire County Council that it would be in their interest to spend approximately a tenth of the sum spent last year on policing to prevent trouble by confrontational strategies, and using the funds to help the Grand Council themselves and its established in the production of a peaceful celebration without intrusive policing and subsequent incrimination. Now, in consultation with travellers and all those members of the public wishing to go to Stonehenge, it has been deemed that it's perhaps not realistic time frame now, and 5 minutes left up until the summer, more than a token event to actually be held this year as ground plan for future years. But on the 15th of February this year, the Grand Council submitted a 20-page draft, which I have here, to English Heritage and Wiltshire County Council and the police and various other parties involved, putting in specific plans based on proper emergency planning procedures to ensure that if an event was to occur this year, it would be a peaceful and orderly event. And in fact, the aims of that, in accordance with the Druid custom of Eisteddfod, is to entertain and divert persons from converging on the monument at the time of the dawn ceremony. We've asked that the stones be opened for dawn entry from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. on June the 21st, allowing time to clear the site afterwards for normal Stonehenge opening hours, with a meditation for those not wishing to go to the dawn ceremony in the afternoon between 4 and 7 o'clock. Now, the time of dawn is 3:44 a.m., so that's a few hours either side of that, and the time of solstice in the afternoon is 4:33 p.m. Now, we've also liaised, obviously, with all members of the public, members of the Stonehenge campaign, travellers, and all other interested parties who wish to go to Stonehenge, and with Grand Council also liaising with Wiltshire County Council, the police, and English Heritage. Now, we were greatly helped in the chance of making this year a peaceable event, in that on January the 14th in Glastonbury, a meeting took place amongst tourism travellers in which the travellers themselves decided that the opening of the stones for a spiritual celebration was for them far more important than the separate issue of the site for camping or festival. And that in order to see the stones reopened, they would agree to be bound by proposals put to English Heritage by Grand Council, were such proposals accepted. And also, of course, obviously we're calling on Lord Montague, therefore, to reopen the stones in time for a peaceful event this year. It's also pointed out by travellers that numbers likely to attend this year would not be so many as in previous years, because there is a Glastonbury festival this year, and for most people this will mean a 10-day park up, which they perhaps won't wish to lose for the sake of a non-existent park up at Stonehenge. It'll be adequate temporary parking only. Now, in order to alleviate Lord Montague's fear that there would be more than 500 persons in the stones themselves at any one time, it was suggested, in fact, by travellers and others that alternative assembly points be created around the stones themselves with suitably fire-marshalled braziers where performers such as jugglers and Morris dancers and poets, etc., can entertain. Now, having a number of other entertainment, social attractor areas around the stones, therefore, means that the stones are not overloaded with people. We've got several events happening inside the Stonehenge arena, and it takes the numbers of people wishing to be in the stones at any one time off around other events happening on the field there and then. Now, we've also, in order to make this easier, as far as allowing people to arrive easily and disperse easily, which are the main important emergency planning considerations that have to be taken into account, we have also asked that the police keep a minimal presence in order to reduce the risk of confrontation, and also, of course, the cost to the taxpayer. We've also asked them to eliminate the helicopter from the proceedings so that noise doesn't obliterate communication between those people on the ground. It's essential for maintaining peace. Now, we've asked if English Heritage and Wiltshire County Council and the police will in fact make up their minds about this by March the 21st in order to allow time for travellers and all those members of the public wishing to go to Stonehenge to put themselves in good order. It's appreciated by everyone, but as usual we all have to be on best behaviour because it's important to have Stonehenge open for a small event this year, and we hope slightly larger organised events in future years, but no one wishes to see anything occurring which would otherwise prevent that right continuing. Now, the original law I quoted there, of 1176, is the law on which the Welsh High Stepford is based, and of course Her Majesty the Queen herself is patron of the Welsh High Stepford. And we therefore respectfully submit that we are applying for a lawful event this year, and we hope and trust that Lord Montague and Mr. Girvan of Wiltshire, Mr. Avery, Mr. Browning, Wiltshire County Council will take this into effect, and we will have a positive result. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just round up one or two things. All this action is obviously directed towards something happening. I think it's important to bear in mind that the views of all the speakers you see here today are not necessarily shared by all the other speakers, and that various proposals are being put forward as to what should be the right sort of event. But the whole point of the campaign really is to bring all sides, that includes people here, that includes the authorities, to negotiations, because I think all of us agree on the basic principle that what we need is for everybody to be working together to create something really nice at Stonehenge, something that will be a credit to the country, something perhaps that might have a lot of green consciousness to it, because we need a lot of that right now. We seriously do. One of the things that will be happening, and it isn't organised by the campaign, it's going to be chaired by somebody well known in Salisbury, who most people would regard as independent. There's this public meeting on March 15th. That's going to be a fairly important test of local public opinion, because we know that local public opinion has swung towards our case. Very much so, since all those people were arrested in Amesbury High Street in the small hours of the morning last year with noisy helicopters, with Sky Shout and Night Sun and all this technology that the police now have at their disposal. That's what we're looking to see. So that the campaign is going to look both locally in Wiltshire, because obviously if the people of Wiltshire don't support what's going to happen, it won't happen. They have to be convinced that what's going to happen won't disrupt their lives, and that it will be something beneficial to their community as much as it is to the people who wish to go. As far as the international appeal is concerned, one thing worth saying about that, which is simply this, that a lot of people left the country because of what happened at the Beanfield, and they went to Amsterdam and Berlin and Paris and Spain and a lot further afield than that. And that there is still a communication network between those people and people in this country. This international appeal isn't just a question of building up an international database of alternative and mainstream media, which is the other thing that will be happening. And we also plan to send out material from now on in 3 languages, English, French and German, because it's important that people understand the message. Right, perhaps now you'd like to ask questions, and perhaps indicate when you ask a question who you would like to answer it.
Tim Roberts from the Morning Star. Have you had any meetings with youth organisations in Wiltshire or representatives of people in the community?
We've been having meetings with English Heritage approximately every 3 months for the last 3 or 4 years. Last year we had a meeting with the head people at Wiltshire Constabulary. That was from the Deputy Chief Constable down, including the operational commanders, such as they were going to be in the summer. And the police brick-walled us, stonewalled us. They're totally intransigent. They refuse to listen to anything that we have to say and come back with a constructive proposal. Perhaps, Don, you'd like to add something about the attitudes of the police?
Yes, one of the things which is difficult to work out is quite who's behind what. I mean, it's interesting that when English Heritage attempt to cooperate with us over smoothly running events at the winter solstice and the equinox, a large stumbling block is immediately placed in the way by Wiltshire County Council with these orders for the closures of the tracks, which makes those events a great deal more difficult. Well, I indicated earlier that it seems from their actions that Wiltshire County Council actually want trouble. It seems to me to be rather improbable that that really is what they want, but if it isn't, then I'm still waiting for some evidence of that. And one thing that we obviously need to do and will be doing through the next few months, and the public meeting is a part of this, is attempting to bring to the attention of the people of Wiltshire what effect the actions of their local authorities, both the county council and the district council, have been, and try to get them to say whether they think that this is really the way that they want this event dealt with. And we've established extensive local contacts with sort of political organisations, religious organisations, a wide spectrum of people. And we hope that through this public meeting we will be able to actually bring the whole debate very much into the open in front of the people of Wiltshire, and try and get some clearer expression of their views, and hopefully that they will make their views known to their their elected councillors who then hopefully may change their tune.
Will people from, say, Amesbury Parish Council be going along to this meeting and be invited there?
They will be invited. I mean, one thing which has been extremely interesting over the last 2 or 3 years is that Amesbury Town Council has been bitterly and consistently hostile to anything to do with festivals or travellers. It's been suggested to us that the moving spirit of this is Councillor Peach, who's the local butcher, and as most of the people who attended the festival were vegetarians, he's probably the only local trader who didn't have his profits increased when the festival was on. That's a suggestion. But the interesting thing about this is the contrast between what you get from the council and what you get from the people of Amesbury. Because everybody who talked to local people about what happened last year, and what appeared in the local media very much reflects our own experience here, is that they were horrified by the police action, and they said we'd rather have a peaceful festival than helicopters overhead at 2 a.m. yelling "You have no escape." I mean, nobody likes that happening, you know, in their own town, and quite a lot of local people were arrested last year. Some of them were even charged. Most of them were released without charge, and we are expecting that there will be further civil cases against the police arising from those arrests.
Can I ask you a question about the election for the European Court? Can you explain a little bit more about exactly what stage your lodging case is at?
It's not that advanced. There's been various attempts to lodge rumours of attempts to remove them, and part of it's been all functions of the scope of the campaign to actually start clearing up some unfinished business, and that is definitely one of them. It's not something that's been possible to attempt to quickly, but we've now been in a position to organise it quickly, and we'll be following that quite seriously next year.
And is it, you're talking about European Court of Human Rights?
Yes, yeah. And again, it would be on religious and political human rights basis. It is a fairly complex thing to organise. It's not an instant thing.
I mean, one little story that I think it may be worth reminding you of to indicate what kind of international impact these events can have. I mean, it got less attention than I expected at the time, but following the Battle of the Beanfield, there was a Greek general election on. And the then Prime Minister, Mr. Papandreou, in the course of his election campaign, made a speech saying that if the voters supported the Conservative opposition, they would turn Greece into a police state like Britain under Mrs. Thatcher, and look at what they just did at Stonehenge. It's also interesting that following that, the British ambassador demanded a formal apology and got it, so I think that's an indication that the government is sensitive to these considerations. But over a whole range of things, as we all know, the British government is really looking like the reactionary corner of Europe, and I think as we move towards European integration, it is becoming less and less possible for this country to hold out as the last refuge of reactionary and authoritarian politics left in Europe, and it's against the background of that we'll be pursuing this campaign.
Tell us a bit more about National Youth Day.
I was wondering who would ask about that. Yeah, well, getting close to the earth is something that you can do a lot more easily when you don't have your clothes on. It's something you can do a lot more easily by going out of a centrally heated building, for example. Most of you probably work in air-conditioned offices where the windows don't open. And there's sick building syndrome. Have you heard of it? But it's a bad scene for people who work in offices. So get out of the buildings, get in touch with the seasons, and try taking your clothes off for a little while. It's amazing actually when you do, and a lot of people did at the Stonehenge Festival, and they still do at festivals, how quickly you get accustomed to the idea of everybody around you having no clothes. I mean, it's no problem at all. Difficult at first, certainly. Hardly surprising. The other thing, of course, the other thing that I would like to see promoted is the fact that there are quite a lot of stretches of beach in this country that are now nudist beaches. So there's nothing to stop people going there and having a little party. Perhaps they don't want to trek all the way down to Stonehenge. And certainly at Stonehenge, if we get a festival together, I'm sure there'll be loads of people who take their clothes off on the Stonehenge. It's good fun.
I don't usually have those. I think it's one of the things we've got to, it's not just the nudity that brings you closer to the natural bit. I think this is what a lot of people have a problem with, is if you can just shed all your biases and intolerances and then start again and look at it reasonably, this whole sort of Stonehenge hippie festival traveller problem, and it's not really that far removed from anything else. I mean, we all live, we all have kids and jobs and homes. I mean, to a lot of people, I'm manufacturer's ideal. I'm an owner-occupier, send my kids to school, you know, all sort of thing, you know, I've got my own enterprise business. Don't owe anything to anybody. Don't take a lot from the state, you know, in sort of services. We don't actually get a lot of services. And I think of all the things that you actually get from the council, you know, everything from bin bags to your library books, and policemen. And the only thing policemen ever do to us, you know, is batter us. Yet we're having to pay, so we still pay taxes. But we don't get the services, we don't get anything that people in houses get. Why is Maggie Thatcher trying to take me off the road? There's something more than just Stonehenge and travellers. And I think before too long it's going to affect an awful lot of ordinary people. And I think it's about time ordinary people start realising that they're next.
Yeah, because that's very true. That's something we all have to think about very carefully.
Anybody old enough to remember Nazi Germany?
Is that what's been happening at Stonehenge has been a wonderful training ground for the police. They can try all their new weapons, all their new tactics, new laws, new ways of working new laws. They do get value for money for their £500,000 a year. And they more or less said that to us last year when we had the meeting. We were talking about the cost. I said, we don't care about the money. And they don't care about the money because it's good value for money. They can get plenty of practice against an opponent that they do have some respect for.
Well, I've heard it said by policemen that we're good training material for them because we don't actually hit back. So therefore we don't actually do physical damage to these policemen or whatever. So they can't, you know, minors are a bit tougher than we are in a lot of cases.
And the smokescreen is the unpopular minority tag. Whether it's peace convoy or hippies or whatever it is, stick a label on someone, tell everybody else that they're bad news, you can do what you like to them. It doesn't matter what you do to them. That's what Hitler did with the Jews.
And
before
the
he did it,
before that?
Before he did it with the Jews, he did it to the travellers. That's what's happening in this country. It's bloody serious.
This is really one of the reasons now why the Druids are involved in the travellers' issues in this respect. Up until recent years, we've been fairly separate camps, but certainly when we saw the unnecessary way in which people, including women and children, were treated in 1988 through lack of planning on all sides by the authorities, this is why we chose to step in, because we believe that every person who comes to Stonehenge or any of the other ancient sites in peace is welcome to be there, whether they wear a suit or whether they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the basic line that we all try to stick to, because the Stonehenge campaign is a common front for a large number of groups of people with different interests, and the only criterion that we put on groups that are allowed to come in under the parasol, there are two. I mean, one is that they're totally non-violent, and the second is that they uphold the principle of equal access to the stones for solstice ceremonies and don't claim any exclusive rights, and that's why we were very glad to welcome the Druid orders to join us at this press conference on that basis, that on the basis that everybody has an equal right to access. And I think in principle that's something which has been recognised by English heritage too, and it's on that basis that we continue to work. If I can shove in a little plug at this stage, you may have noticed that the tape that was playing when you came in, that is actually a BBC Radio 4 programme for transmission on Thursday this week, Thursday the 22nd at 7:20, called Turning of the Seasons, the Autumn Equinox at Stonehenge. And it's material recorded at the autumn equinox celebrations last year, which I think gives a very good general impression of the way these events have gone at the equinoxes and the winter solstice, and perhaps some kind of a prototype for what might happen, or part of what might happen at the summer solstice too, once we get back to a state of normality.
Yeah, it's worth looking at now. What actually went wrong at the festival? Well, a number of things went wrong at the festival. I think both sides, if we can call them that, it's difficult to define all this, but let's talk about sides, the authorities and the people who were at the festival. We're both pretty naive. What was happening was pretty new. There was a whole free zone down at Stonehenge, which the police called a no-go area, but which most people within it felt was just a free zone. You could more or less do what you wanted, with very little sanction from anyone. The authorities, instead of keeping an eye on what was going on and keeping the situation under control to the extent that they were satisfied with it continuing, didn't do that. They buried their heads in the sand, pretended it wasn't happening, and hoped it would go away. On the other side, the people at the festival, seeing how much they were getting away with, started to take liberties. Not everybody, but a few. And by the time we got to 83 and 84, there were some illegal things that were being done so blatantly on that site that the authorities could no longer tolerate the situation of burying their head in the sand. And so what happened? On that programme that Dom has just mentioned, Lynn likens the situation quite accurately, I think, to a parent with a child. If you like, the authorities are the parents and the people at the festival were the children. We were sort of learning a lot of new things, political, spiritual, all kinds of things, just branching out on our own. And the relationship between the people at the festival and the authorities wasn't the correct relationship. I mean, there's a phrase in the I Ching, Chinese Book of Changes, that says there is nothing more easily avoided and more difficult to do than breaking a child's will. And what happened, basically, is that the people who went to the festival ended up spoilt brats, because there wasn't enough cooperation going on, there wasn't enough negotiation, and nobody was in control. Well, we've come a long way since then. We've come an awful long way. We've learned a lot. Everybody who goes down to Stonehenge regularly for these equinoxes and solstices has learned a hell of a lot in that time. And so have the authorities. I mean, sooner or later they're going to have to wise up to the fact that we are here to stay, we are not going to go away, and that they have got to do something. They can't just lock the doors and keep locking everybody out of Stonehenge and hoping that we'll stop coming. We won't stop coming. It's a very new culture, this, but it is a culture. So if we all get around the table, maybe we can work something out that everybody will be satisfied with. Precisely what form it will take is very difficult to say towards beginning going.
It's of course important to realise that all the time that Stonehenge has been open, there's been no trouble whatsoever. The only occasions have been when attempts have been made to close it. The Druid Order certainly feel it's wiser to manage the event properly, rather than create conflict by restricting access.
Yeah, when we finish, we'll have a chance. We'll be around for a little while. Well, we've said all we want.
I think we've said it, yes.
Right, okay then.
I'll say this anyway.
Please help yourself to food and drink. We'd very, very much appreciate it if you could put a donation in the beer glass at the end there, because we're not exactly rich.
Well, taking hold of the Comedy Strand tomorrow, Kate and Ali.
Is that similar? Where
are you from?
Radio.
Oh, right.
Lots of bigger cars. Right. Things that people create when they go. Standing.
Sure, I'm John Aitken, trustee of the Travellers' Aid Trust.
Can you tell me some of the things that actually go on around Stonehenge?
Well, it really gets extremely silly. I mean, the main thing last year was that we were dealing basically with small groups of people, mostly on foot. So we ended up with squads of 10 or a dozen police in the full riot gear. I mean, literally pulling old people out of the hedges and marching them off. They were also taking the line that wherever there would be more than one person, I mean, for instance, one person carried